as a queer person living in the Midwest, there is so much discernment that I've had to develop, and I think online we could use a lot more discernment. Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Jacob. Welcome back to Sunday Yap Session, the show where every Sunday I hop on here and yap at you all about something with some sort of cohesive storyline to carry us all through, and sometimes we do better than others. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to give it a like, because that helps me out quite a bit, and if you want to come yap with me every single Sunday, be sure to hit that subscribe button, because I upload every Sunday and sometimes more. Limoncello LaCroix, let's get into it. So in my last video, we talked about Chapel Roan and the criticism surrounding her and her choosing not to break ties with her conservative family. And I talked about how she and I both kind of believe that a lot of people just don't have a lot of perspective when it comes to like the Midwestern queer experience. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. Jacob from the editing bay here. I wanted to add a little bit of clarity here because there's about 3 or 4 minutes of this video that I cut out because I was using a situation with a recent kind of drama that happened as a jumping off point to talk about what I wanted to talk about today. And then I did some additional reading, additional researching, additional watching of some videos, and I realized that I had missed some important key facts and had misinterpreted some things and was basically operating off the information of other people talking about a situation rather than doing the smart, intelligent thing that I tell you all to do all the time, to do your own research, to look into things, to thoroughly understand and explore things thoroughly before getting on here and talking about them. So while that doesn't compromise the entirety of the video, it does kind of add this weird, awkward gap. I nixed all of that stuff about what I was talking about with a specific creator because I got the facts wrong and I wanted to be transparent about that. I didn't want to have like a confusing gap and just kind of like act like it wasn't there. So that's why that's why you're seeing me here right now. Because I think a lot of us, at least me in the area I am in and the people I'm engaged with, have had to deal with a lot of this sort of resistance. And I think these specific types of archetype of people are in some ways more difficult to deal with than the people that are outright bigoted. And I think the culture around here is a little bit difficult and tricky to navigate. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Especially because I think a lot of people think about bigotry, they think about racism, they think about Trump supporters and things like that, and they think about like the people that are on the news, like the angry, belligerent people that are in like those Trump brigades. They've got their whole car decked out, they've got flags on their home and stuff like that, where it's very showy, it's very antagonistic, they're very riled up people. And I think a lot of people think that like that's the majority of what's going on in the American Midwest and the American South, and that anybody who is bigoted or has bigoted beliefs is going to be this like very showy person about that, when it is much more likely the case that it is so much more sinister and subtle and below the surface. And I think there are a couple reasons for that. I think culturally in this area, I think a lot of people are kind of familiar with like Southern hospitality and how like everybody's super sweet and super nice. And I think that is to an extent definitely true. I've lived in Rhode Island as well, and then I've traveled a couple different places in a couple other countries. And I definitely do think that there is like a sweetness and more of an openness to kind of engage with people down here. Most people are pretty polite. Most people are pretty sweet, even if they like have these sort of bigoted beliefs. People tend to lead with niceness, and then the meanness is like a subtextual sort of layer under it that you kind of have to read between the lines to understand these things. I think like the most common example that people say is like the phrase bless your heart, which like on its face sounds like, oh, bless your heart is so sweet, when bless your heart really means more like, oh, you idiot, you fool, you like. And so there's like a lot of that culture of kind of like hiding these things under sort of like soft, delicate, gentle statements that aren't super rude. There is a religious aspect of it as well, especially in this area because there's a lot of like evangelical Christian denominations. That's one of the denominations that I was raised up in. I was raised in the Methodist Church. I was in it for like 18 years or something like that. Far too long. Far too long. But there is definitely like a sentiment within like evangelical spaces specifically, both just like the doctrine of like the Bible and what it teaches, but also like the evangelical part, because if you're not familiar with like evangelical movements, the whole point is that you're supposed to like spread the message and basically convert as many people as you can, and in my opinion, use kind of predatory tactics and get close to people and develop relationships to get them to come to church essentially. So you have that, and then you have like the Bible that talks about like, being kind, loving your neighbor, hating the sin but not the sinner, and kind of all of these things that on its face sound really nice and sound like, you know, you're accepting people as they are and you can critique like the way they choose to live and the decisions they make, but you still like love them as people essentially, which leads to a lot of fakeness. Is basically the way I'll put it, and that is part of the reason that I ended up leaving. And maybe we'll talk about my like evangelical journey another time, but that would be like a whole video's worth of content. And so that is one one of the things that makes it really difficult about navigating as a queer person in this area, especially if you are someone who is in a church or in a conservative family or in a conservative community, which I was in all three for various extensive time, because there's kind of this like sentiment that you don't exactly know who you can trust, who you can be open with, how much of yourself you can show, because it is sort of this like subtextual thing. And people will know things about you and your identity and the things that you do, and on their face act like they're your friend, act like they are someone they want to be in community with, and either internally they think everything you're doing is wrong and shameful and that you're a person who needs to turn their life around or you're gonna go to hell or whatever, or they just like straight up hate you. They're just being nice to you because that's like the polite thing to do. And obviously not everybody's like that. Like there are allies in here. I was fortunate to grow up in a space where like I went to school with a lot of people that like were either pretty indifferent about gay people or were just like outright supportive. The community that I had like growing up in school and stuff was not large, but there were a handful of out gay people. I mean, granted, I was in like a band and stuff too, so it was all like people that were queer or later learned that they were queer. So like I was in a pretty accepting space in general, but like overall it wasn't super bad in the grand scheme of things. I think if I was in like a much more rural area, not that I wasn't, I was in kind of like an in-between space. And so these systems are difficult to navigate, and I think especially if you're neurodivergent as well and you have, you know, difficulties understanding subtext, the fact that people say things and don't actually say what they mean a lot of times, I think that can be really tricky to navigate. And I think there are like so many stories of people in the Midwest of, you know, people having a friend that they thought that they were close to and really knew well, and they come out to them, and then that friend like tells another friend and tells like their parents or someone something like that out of quote unquote concern for you, because I don't know, think that they like can help you in some way or something, or they're like religious and they're telling other people to try to get you like to go back to church and stuff, which like sounds like conspiratorial and like why would anyone do that? Like I promise it happens. If you're from the Midwest or the South and you've experienced this or know someone, put this in the comments, because I think this is like a very overwhelmingly common experience. But yeah, there's just like so many bigoted people who are kind of like hiding in plain sight and will really like form relationships and build community with you and things like that in like very bizarre ways, and people that like seemingly on paper do not like you or do not approve of your lifestyle. Like one example, this isn't about like sexuality, but very recently there was someone who I used to work with who like recently encountered me because we were in the same space, and we're in the same space pretty regularly, so like I talk to them occasionally, or they try to talk to me more, and I just kind of like be polite and talk back or whatever. And I was kind of curious, like, oh, what are they up to? What's been going on since we worked together last? So I go to their Facebook, I saw that they had recently got married, and I was like, oh, cool, like, let's go see their spouse, who they're married to, what's the story there, just being nosy, like I do. And their partner has, like, a Blue Lives Matter banner on their social media profiles, and I'm just like, why are you talking to me? Like, if that doesn't bother you, because this is a person who was like very educated, someone who knows what Blue Lives Matter actually means and is not duped into thinking it is just a pro-police thing. This is someone who understands and I know has a context. And so she's cool with that and is cool with marrying somebody who is in line with that ideology, but then like wants to be friends with me. And it's a lot of stuff like that. It's a lot of, I don't know, just like weirdness. A lot of weirdness. And I think on one hand, you know, it is nice in some ways that these people, a lot of times, saying broadly, because there definitely are people that are very hostile and very antagonistic and very just bold and evil, like I was talking about at the beginning. But I feel like in some ways, like, of course, it's nice that there are a lot more people that are just kind of like subliminally bigoted and aren't going to be like mean to my face and don't make things like super difficult for me to navigate. It'll be kind of polite to me. Like, I will definitely take that any day over someone who is like trying to beat me up or something like that. Like, I'm not trying to say that like this is like the worst possible circumstance or things like that. But at the same time, like the desire to get close to me and the desire to seem kind to me feels like predatory and it feels fake. I don't know. I would rather these people be like very upfront and very bold about what they believe in instead of try to like, I don't know, get close to me and just take this sort of like, oh, we believe different things sort of approach to it. Because it feels like sinister. Hopefully like y'all get what I'm saying, because I feel like I'm not doing like a precise job of explaining how this makes me feel. But like, I don't know, sometimes it feels like I'm being like lured in. People are not presenting who they truly are. And then kind of getting back to the evangelical stuff of it all, like that stuff is actually sinister and dubious. I specifically remember when I was in church and them like talking about how like, oh, if you see people that like you think need to go to church or da, encouraging you to like build friendships and build relationships and kind of plant the seeds of religion and stuff like that and fostering them and trying to like draw people in over time and convert them. Like, it is so weird. Like, I don't know. I think people a lot of times are very, especially online and people that are clearly not from this area, people are so confused as to why conservatives are so good at organizing and so good at getting stuff done. And like living through all of this, like they are very good at building community. They are very good at like building strategies to connect with people and convert people and so on and so forth, especially in like religious spaces and stuff like that. And that's kind of what I was talking about in the last episode about like making change and things like that. They use strategies that work very well, you know, planting seeds of ideas and trying to like get people to understand things over time. Just like I was talking about is a good idea for how to break down these sort of toxic ideologies around being homophobic or being bigoted or things like that. Those same sort of tactics are the same reason why like evangelical movements are so powerful and have had such a chokehold on like this region for so long, because it's very pervasive, very strategic. But that's a conversation for another day. I feel like we're getting a little off topic. As a queer person living in the Midwest, there is so much discernment that I've had to develop and really kind of understanding who people are, what their intentions are, making sure I'm doing my due diligence of not just accepting kindness on its face value and really making sure that I'm in community with people that really align with me. And I think online we could use a lot more discernment, because I think even if you don't have this experience that I have, I think there are so many obvious tells. And again, not to make like blanket statements, but especially with white people, I think any white person, especially in this area, that says they're not political, they don't do politics, they don't like to talk about politics, just for future reference, 99% of the time, that is a red herring that they are conservative. Like, I've had that engagement and that conversation so many times with people, every single time, for the most part, that is the case. But yeah, I don't know. There's so much that could be said about like queer experiences in the Midwest and South. There's like so much I could say. I guess I'm just gonna call it here for now. But if this is interesting to you and you want me to kind of talk more about what the lived experience I've kind of gone through is, because intersectionally as a Black and queer person, I think there are a lot of kind of interesting situations and weird things I've had to sort of navigate that I think are good for people to know. So if this is something y'all want to hear about again, let me know, and I'm more than happy to kind of dig through my brain and see what stories and observations and things I can kind of pull out. Some of it's kind of hard for me to think about because for me, it's just so normalized and it's just my experience that I've gone through. I didn't even really think about like what I wanted to talk about today until I was scrolling through TikTok and seeing people talk about this. And I was like, oh, wait, okay. There's something interesting here. So sometimes I have to remember too that like we all have different perspectives and different lived experiences, and something that seems like so obvious to me and so like normal and something that I've engaged with so many times is like shocking and new information for other people too. So like, I don't know. I'm one of those people that like something will happen to me that's so wild and like unhinged and shocking to a lot of people. And I'm just like, oh yeah, that's my life. So normalizing trauma, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, that's all I got today. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to come yap with me every single Sunday, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And like I said before, if you enjoyed today's video, give it a like. That helps me out quite a bit. I hope you all have a lovely week, and I will catch you all on the next Sunday Yap Session.